Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. Today we're going to be talking about hope. And it's one of those giant words, giant topics, but I'm really excited actually about our conversation that we're about to have. Tell us a little bit about what, the H word, like the H would sound like the F word, but it's not. It's the H word today, but hope and how we're going to talk about it.
Well, I hope this is a good episode. Oh, wait, that's not hope. Hope is not wishful thinking. To start off with, what isn't hope? And it's wishful thinking. Might be even dreaming, but it's wishing for something not to be the way it is and wishing for it to be another way, which is a very passive thing. It's a survival mentality and reflects that. We sense or perceive a threat to well-being, triggers the sympathetic nervous system, and we feel a sense of stress and need. That can be very acute, like during COVID, during a pandemic. It was very stressful. And it literally, for many people, was survival. Periods of really significantly increased stress activate the sympathetic nervous system, flight or fight. And then we're into that tsunami of stress. Stress and need, distress, discontent, avoidance and isolation, resistance, defiance, anger, not assertive, and then wishful thinking, self-gratification. Mm-hmm. We just want to feel good. What will make me feel good? And that can all just be about surviving, but not thriving. With the parasympathetic nervous system, it's recover, relax, rest, digest. Hope lives in the parasympathetic. Wishful thinking in the sympathetic.
And so, this episode is called Hope is Thriving. Mm-hmm. And I like that because it's not just like hope helps you thrive or hope gets you to this place of thriving. No, it actually is. And I love the fact that it's kind of resting in the middle of these, we're quite far in now and we're like, we've hit this moment in the ABCs of thriving where it's like, oh, hang on a minute. Hope is thriving. Yes. We're actually seeing it's a manifestation. It's an embodiment of thriving. Yeah. Yes. And I love the fact, and I think we all can identify with the wishful thinking part and, the self-gratification. I think that's why most of us all put on a few pounds over COVID because we were all having those nice takeaways.
And because we couldn't go out and exercising.
I think there was a thing of, we just need to make ourselves feel good. But there is something that's really different about hope that's not just that wishful thinking. There's something about it that's very concrete and very real and that's based in reality. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? And I'd love us to talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic because I think that's really key in terms of how hope is thriving. Because we know that if we're in the sympathetic, where we're in this continual pattern of fight and flight, that is surviving at best. Whereas we know that if we're in the parasympathetic, there is that sense of thriving. And there's something about hope that helps us stay in that space. So, but first talk about more of the definition of what hope is.
Yes. Hope, I think of hope as a realistic and rational anticipation of a positive outcome. A realistic and rational anticipation of a positive, desired outcome. That's how I think of hope. It's realistic. Now, I want to qualify this, because what we perceive as realistic when we are in the sympathetic nervous system is often not realistic at all. Think of it as the negative anticipation. Something bad is going to happen, or I'm not going to have enough, or we expect a negative reaction or response. How often is that actually borne out and experienced? Most of the time it's not. Our worst fears don't come about. That's a sympathetic reactivity. So it's not realistic. That's why when someone is in despair or sadness and that sort of thing, you can literally talk them out of that by helping them be more realistic. Does that?
Yeah.
And it's not rational. When we're in the sympathetic nervous system, that flight or fight, we're often very not rational to the point of irrational. You follow?
Yeah.
So realistic and rational for what actually is realistic and rational, not what I think is realistic and rational, because it may not be. Anticipation. It's future oriented. Hope is future focus. By definition, by the nature of it, I'm thinking about the future. It's what I'm thinking about the future. And with hope, there is a positive, optimistic anticipation.
And so we need that as part of our lives to thrive. So there is supposed to be some measure of us anticipating a positive future that is thriving.
Yes.
Now, it's not to say that we're not that, and it actually helps us in the present.
Yes. There was a University of Amsterdam study published in September 2023. The title of it is Calm and Hope as Medicine During Stress. Calm and Hope as Medicine During Stress. As it says, periods of collective stress, such as a pandemic or climate crisis, I would throw in there cultural crisis or economic crisis, period of crisis, have a major impact on our psychological and medical well-being. What role do emotions play in helping us cope during tough times? In a worldwide study by 62 scientists among more than 24,000 participants in 51 countries, a relationship was established for the first time between specific emotions and well-being during a period of collective stress. And you know what those were? Calm and hope.
Wow. Calm
and hope appear to be promising routes to psychological well-being. Anxiety, loneliness, and sadness are consistently associated with reduced well-being, cross-cultural. This is just an essential human, not cultural thing. Psychological well-being is promoted by positive emotions, but how we experience emotions is very specific. So I remember when I was doing group therapy, one of the things that I would note is that frequently when we're dealing with emotions, we're not very specific. Good, bad, mad, sad, glad. Okay. But angry, lonely, grateful, all sorts of different specific emotions, but we are often encouraged to just think of them as, how do you feel? I feel good. What good? Or I feel bad. What bad? Do you see how identifying more specifically what is the emotion? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So understanding how specific emotions are linked to our behaviors and well-being provides tools to improve our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And calm and hope are two very specific, positive promoters and indicators of well-being.
That's amazing.
Calm, as in, yes, remember, accept adversity, believe in beneficence, create contentment. Calm. Yes, there's stress and need. That doesn't mean even if it escalates to distress and discontent, oh wait, that's a choice in the way I perceive it. Simply because things aren't the way I want them to be doesn't mean they can't eventually be that way. I just described hope, didn't I?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that there isn't a way to that and a means to that. But if I'm in a survival mentality, that's not on my radar. But if I'm in a thrival mentality, I am. I'm looking for that. I'm anticipating that. I'm looking for and maybe even creating opportunities where I didn't see them or expect them. Hope. So calm and hope.
And I think, Tom, that, I think that there's something really, and we've talked about this before, about how when we're thriving, there's this real link to our health and well-being. And that is body, mind, spirit. But physically, there's like proven so I think there's something about, if we don't have hope, a lack of hope can basically keep us in that fight and flight mode, which by default will hamper our health and well-being. But I love the fact that this sense of calm kind of helps us enter into that parasympathetic space. But it's hope that keeps us there. So having things that we're hoping for, whether they're like big, eternal, like ideas of life and meaning, or whether it's actually, I've got a spa day next week, and that's like a little glimmer of hope or something, those are the things that actually, they ground us in the parasympathetic space. And I think the link that has on health, I think is really fascinating to me, because it's saying, actually, when we have hope, not wishful thinking, like you said, that not just this kind of need for some sort of satisfaction or
gratification,
all of that stuff.
Feel good.
But when we have hope, we have real, tangible, confident things that we're looking forward to that will add benefit and joy to our lives, whether they're small things, big things, relational things, spiritual things, family things. I don't know. There's a plethora of hopes that one would have, I think. But when we have those in our lives, so we have this sense of future at our fingertips that is good, that actually grounds us in the parasympathetic, which ultimately gives us good health.
Yes. The scientists found that across all countries, 5 emotions were consistently linked to psychological well-being. Those 5 were calm, hope, anxiety, loneliness, and sadness. Anxiety, loneliness, and sadness are all sympathetic. Flight or fight. Sensing or perceive a threat to well-being. Anxious about it. Lonely, disconnected relationally, and sad. Down. Not hopeful. Experiences of these 5 emotions predicted later changes in well-being. Calm and hope were linked to better psychological well-being, while anxiety, loneliness, and sadness with lower well-being. In other words, you can predict the trajectory of your well-being based on whether there's calm and hope, parasympathetic, or anxiety, loneliness, and sadness. Wow. And you can promote those. You get to choose. You can promote anxiety. You can promote loneliness. You can promote sadness. You can promote calm. You can promote hope. This is where AHA and homeostasis come in. Mm-hmm. Homeostasis is parasympathetic. You literally can invite the brain to do that. Invite the brain with the activating homeostasis toward giving you calm and hope. Or not activate homeostasis and let anxiety, loneliness, and sadness run rampant.
And I think, can I just interject there? Because I think that there's something about the reality of life is, and we've said this so many times in this podcast, and I'm going to quote you, well, change just is, and stress is always happening, you know. So it's not about ignoring sadness, anxiety, and what was the other one? Loneliness. Mm-hmm. It's not ignoring. There are going to be moments of our life that are anxious. You have a diagnosis, then you're going to naturally, as a human being, feel anxious about that. You're going to, you're going to sense or perceive a threat to well-being. Yeah. Yep. And there's going to be times where we feel lonely, and there's going to be times where we feel sad. But I think the point is, I wonder whether the point is that we can't live in those spaces. And I think that calm and hope help us live healthily in a thriving state, mm-hmm. regardless of what's swirling around us. I see it as a very much a grounding in the parasympathetic, Yes. Now, do we dip in and out of flight and fight? Probably, because that's, of course, that's gonna. But that's being alive. But actually, if we have hope, real tangible hope, regardless of what's happening around us, the magnetic pull, so to speak, will pull us back into the parasympathetic, mm-hmm. more than living in the fight and flight. And I actually think that's opposite of what tends to happen these days because of the tsunami of stress and what we're all going through. So what we're saying is actually let's allow hope be this magnet that pulls us. And will we kind of veer off every now and then? Yeah, sure, because we have days and we have years sometimes and we have weeks and we have things happen. But the implementation, the seeking out of those opportunities, the emotion of that too, of like knowing, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with all this stuff, but I have this hope that mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to, and it pulls your spirit up. And, even if you're in the middle of crisis, if you have a little bit of hope, and you don't even need that much, it grounds you in a different space. Do you think that's correct? Yes. Okay. So, calm and hope are manifestations of the parasympathetic nervous system. Recover, mm-hmm. rest, relax, digest. So calm and hope are manifestations mm-hmm. of the parasympathetic, just as anxiety, loneliness, and sadness are expressions of the sympathetic. Okay. They can also be things that you do to activate the sympathetic or the parasympathetic. So when you're anxious, you activate the sympathetic. Right. Yeah. But what we're saying, you can choose to worry. But what we're saying is if we have hope and we find these little opportunities of hope, then it activates the parasympathetic. Mm-hmm. As well as being an expression of it. Yep. The researchers point out that calm activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps with stress recovery. And hope provides resilience because it helps people focus on opportunities in their environment. What's the connection between calm and hope? Is anticipation. Anticipation in the future, hope. But because of that anticipation of the future, hope, you can be calm in the present. So do you think, and I'm verbally processing mm-hmm. it, so this is like, I don't know how off off this might be, but do you think that hope in some ways, because is anxiety an anticipation of a perceived threat? Is that what anxiety is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so is hope the opposite of anxiety?
Yeah.
Huh.
Hope as the study noted, hope provides resilience because it helps people focus on opportunities in their environment. Survival mentality versus a thrival mentality. Survive doesn't make the most or even see the opportunities that are there. It becomes very reclusive, protective, isolated. I'm just trying to survive. So I don't want to risk. But with thrival mentality, we're looking for opportunities. Hope.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because I like the idea that we're looking for opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes, that word hopelessness, like I'm hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we talk about hope in that context, for me, it's like, well, okay, things might appear hopeless right now, but there's always this opportunity to go and seek out these opportunities in community for hope. And I think that that's really encouraging to people who are, it's almost like hope is never hopeless, because there's always an opportunity to find new hope. Does that make sense?
Hope does not disappoint because hope is not about disappointment.
I think that there's a lot of people who find hope difficult or vulnerable to pursue because of a fear of disappointment. Absolutely. But you just said that hope doesn't disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to people who would maybe identify with what I just said?
It's an anticipation. It's all about anticipation. What am I anticipating? That's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily think of anticipation as a choice, though.
Yeah, am I anticipating everything to be awful, or am I anticipating something to be good?
Am I anticipating recovering? Or am I anticipating more of the same and worse? Hope is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Hope is a perception. It's focusing on, are there opportunities, and I can focus on those, or do I preclude opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
Do I close out the possibilities of improvement? It's the frame of mind, and we can cultivate a frame of mind by the way we think. We can think in a way that stimulates flight or fight, the sympathetic nervous system. We can choose to do that. We can also then choose things that activate the parasympathetic: rest, recover, relax, digest. In other words, do I have a thrival mentality or a survival mentality?
So when we're hoping, when we're living in such a way where we have hope, whatever those hopes might be,
mm-hmm.
It's an embodiment of thriving.
Mm-hmm. And there are literally things that we can do, beginning with, how am I thinking about myself, others, and situations?
Like, even, am I expecting
stimulate the sympathetic
it all to
or parasympathetic?
Yeah, if you're expecting, you or me or any of our listeners are expecting it all to go wrong, then we will live in that cycle of fight and flight. But I wonder whether it's about catching yourself in that space and thinking, you know, if you're struggling with anxiety, for example, or if you're struggling with loneliness, or if you're depressed, I wonder whether there's a way in which you can go, well, let me just choose one thing to focus on that's hopeful and spend time in that space.
Think about it. An expectation or a belief influences your emotions and behaviors, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That's what we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. An expectation or a belief influences behaviors and emotions. The phrase self-fulfilling prophecy, what does that mean?
Well, we're creating our own future.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we do. Mm-hmm. That's the point. What do you want it to be? Mm-hmm. A self-fulfilling prophecy. I anticipate it's going to be a certain way. I can create that reality. Negatively or beneficially. Detrimental or beneficial. That's why one of the things that I emphasize so much is just assume beneficial. Believe in beneficence. Mm. If you accept the adversity and then you believe in beneficence, then you can create contentment. Mm-hmm. See the ABCs.
Yeah.
They build on each other. Hope is that expression of the optimistic, positive
of all of
anticipation. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. We get to choose that. Hope is a choice. We can make that.
And I think that's so empowering to know that, because, you know, I'm just thinking of our listeners, Tom, and just, you know, the world we live in. I mean, you described a few of them. We have pandemics, we have the environment. I was speaking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago from England, and she was talking to me about how her kids, her 14-year-old and 12-year-old, are actually feeling kind of the worry about the environment. You know, this is the
existential.
Yeah, yes. There's stuff that in our world that is heavy and hard, and we all know that. But I think the message of this episode is that not hope is a choice, and actually it's a choice that leads you to thrive. And so I think that that's incredibly empowering to people, because what we're saying is you don't have to project yourself into a future that's full of anxiety, full of closed doors, full of sadness, full of loneliness. It's actually, you can have a future. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be devoid of stress, but you can have a future full of, you know, or littered with hope and littered with small hopes and big hopes, and allow in a way that allows you to thrive and be healthy.
And the way we talk to ourselves, how we think about things, either promotes and activates the sympathetic flight or fight. We become our own worst enemies and we are in survival mode. Mm-hmm. Or we choose thrival. We choose to relax. We choose to recover. We choose those things, those thoughts, those ideas, those activities, those relationships that are about recovering, relaxing, digesting. Careful of your nutrition. Rest, relax, recover, digest aren't just things that we experience. They are things that we can promote. And hope promotes those opportunities, because that is the opportunity. Thriving is the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And we get to hope. Not wishful thinking. Not dreaming. Not if only. But what are the opportunities there? Because there are always opportunities. Mm-hmm. But if I'm wishing and dreaming for something that isn't realistic or rational or actually even an opportunity, then I'm going to miss the ones that are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it just brings dissatisfaction and frustration and all of those things. But yeah, actually, but there is incredible satisfaction with hope.
Yes. Yes. That's why hope does not disappoint. Hmm. And I think ultimately it's because it's loving. Hmm. That is just a very loving thing to do for ourselves. Now, we may believe all sorts of things, believe that we don't deserve it, believe that it's not going to happen, but then we're just engaging in self-fulfilling prophecies. Well, why not prophesy hope?
I love that. Well, this has been a really great conversation, and my hope is that
anticipation or wishing maybe.
Well, my anticipation is that this will be very beneficial to whoever's listening and will spur us on into that space of being humans that thrive, you know?
Because hope is thriving. Mm-hmm. And thriving is hope. You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.